أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيد الأنبياء وخاتم المرسلين سيدنا ونبينا بالقاسم محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين واللعنة الدائمة الباقية لأعدائهم من الآن إلى قيام يوم الدين. أما بعد، فقد قال الله سبحانه وتعالى في كتابه الكريم: شهر رمضان الذي أنزل فيه القرآن هدى للناس وبينات من الهدى والفرقان. صلوات. With the blessings of the month of Ramadan, we have been looking at the Tafseer of Surah Dukhan, Surah number 44 of the Qur'an, keeping in mind that this is a surah which is also recited during the Laylatul Qadr. We looked at the earlier ayat where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala begins by talking about the Qur'an itself and then the importance of Laylatul Qadr. We looked at that also in detail. And inshallah we'll continue to explore the other ayat. But before that, last night we looked at the issue of how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala basically describes himself as Rabbus Samawati wal Ard wa ma baynahuma. He is the Lord of the entire universe. He is the one yuhyi wa yumit. He is the one who gives life and causes death. He is the Lord of your fathers, your fathers. And so there is one God who is the universal God and who manages the whole universe. Of course, he has malaika who do the job on his behalf. And that's where we looked at the concept of wasila and the link in the management of the universe. And we looked at the example of the Malakul Maut. There are ayat where Allah says, I am the one who take your soul at the time of death. But then there are ayat where Allah says, my Rusul, referring to the Malaika, that my agents come and take the soul. And how do you reconcile this? It's very simple. You don't look at the things from the horizontal point of view. You look at things from the vertical point of view. If you put Malakul Maut and Allah on the same line, this is shirk. But if you put Allah here and Malakul Maut down there, and whatever Malakul Maut does is based on the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this is the essence of Tawheed. So it is the same thing, but if you look at it from the horizontal perspective, it's shirk. From vertical point of view, it is Tawheed. And that's where we even talked about the importance of Waliullah al-Azam, the role of the Imam, especially during Laylatul Qadr. Just to add one more thing to it, that in the chain of wasitas, the links between Allah's grace and us, there are many, many links which come in. And just one example would be the parents. They are, of course, on the level of status and power. Muhammad and Ala Muhammad, they are at the top. As we saw the statement of Amir al-Mu'minin in his letter to Muawiyah, where he says, the grace of Allah to us comes directly, and to other people it comes through us. So there is that hierarchy there. But you will see that even the parents become a wasita. A child in the womb of the mother is being nourished by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through the mother. After the birth, it's the mother who is providing the nourishment. Raziq is Allah, but the mother becomes the wasita in between. And that's where we see in Surah Luqman, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, after emphasizing the role of the status of the parents, he says, وَنَشْكُرُ that you should thank me, not only me, وَلِوَالِدَيْكَ, and also thank your parents. Why? Because they are the link between me and you. And so even when it comes to the link in between, you have to appreciate them and thank them. And in that view, when you look at the status of Muhammad and Muhammad, they are at the top. And so when we talk about this concept of tawassul in dua, this is basically part of the concept of Tawheed as explained by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Qur'an. Salawat. Going on to the next section, ayat 10 to 16 of Surah Dukhan. As I said earlier, I was going very slow, but I had to speed up in order to complete this tafsir before 14th of Ramadan, inshallah. This section 10 to 16 is the section where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking about an event which will happen in the future. And that's where the name of this surah comes from. If you look at the ayat, فَارْتَقِبْ يَوْمَ تَأْتِي السَّمَاءُ بِدُخَانٍ مُبِينٍ يَغْشَى النَّاسَ هَذَا عَذَابٌ أَلِيمٌ, that the sky shall bring a visible smoke covering the people globally. Now the italics there in the translation is basically added just to give the full meaning. We'll come to that. This is a painful chastisement. The word Dukhan means smoke, and that's how the name of the surah comes from, the surah ayat number 10. Now, what is the sha'n nuzul? What is the context in which this ayat were revealed? There are two views about it. What does this smoke refer to? The first view is that, and this is mostly from the Sunni Tafseer, including Maulana Maududi, Fakhr Razi and others, where they say that the Prophet, when he did not get positive response from the mushrikeen of Mecca, he became very upset, and one day he prayed to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala against the mushrikeen. And he says to Allah, "Oh Allah, just as there were 7 years of drought and famine for the people of the days of Yusuf, inflict that on the people of Mecca." And so it became this became as an azab, to the extent that there was no food left. They were actually now eating even the dead body of the animals, and the atmosphere looked like as if there was smoke all around. It wasn't real smoke, but it looked like. And so they basically explained this, the concept of Dukhan, in a metaphorical sense. And this is their perspective of the sha'n nuzul of this. But from the ahadith that we have from the Prophet and the Ahlul Bayt, we don't go with the first view. It doesn't even go with this concept of the Prophet being the Rahmatun lil Alameen. Even when after not getting any response from the people of Mecca, he went to Ta'if, and there also he was completely rejected. Not only that, the people of Ta'if actually asked their children to go after the Prophet and hit him with the pebbles. Even then, if you look at the dua of the Prophet, at that time he didn't do but dua, where he said, "Oh Allah, these people of mine are ignorant. Guide them." So that doesn't go with the character of the Prophet when we look at this sha'n nuzul. The second one that view that we have is that this refers to the Dukhan, the smoke which will appear before the Qiyamah, before the Day of Judgment. And this will be one of the main signs of the Day of Judgment. And this will cover the whole world. And that is where we have added in italics, the wordings globally. And this is, if you look at the ahadith that we have, for example, Huzaifa once asked the Prophet, "Mad Dukhan?" And the Prophet actually recited the same ayat here. فَتَلَى رَسُولُ اللَّهِ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَآلِهِ وَسَلَّمَ. In response to Huzaifa's question about Dukhan, about the smoke, the Prophet recited this ayat, فَارْتَقِبْ يَوْمَ تَأْتِ السَّمَاءُ بِدُخَانٍ مُبِينٍ. Means, wait for the time when the sky will come with a visible smoke. And then he says, يَمْلَأُ مَا بَيْنَ الْمَشْرِقِ وَالْمَغْرِبِ. And this smoke will cover the east and the west, referring to the whole world. يَمْسُكُ أَرْبَعِينَ يَوْمًا وَلَيْلًا, and it will stay there for 40 days and nights. And this is considered to be one of the signs of Qiyamah. And the impact on the mu'mineen will be just like they have flu. But on the kafirin, those who do not believe, for them it will be more painful. They will not be able to maintain their balance. They will be more like drunk people. And so it's going to affect everyone, but the mu'mineen will be affected in one way and the kafirin in the other way. And even Amir al-Mu'mineen, for example, in one of the statements that we have from him, he says, "Ashara qabla as-sa'a la budda minha." There are 10 things which will happen surely before the day of Qiyamah. And the third one, he says, "As-Sufyan wad-Dajjal wad-Dukhan." And so when we look at this concept of Dukhan in this ayah, this basically refers to the smoke which will engulf the entire earth before the appearance of the start of the Qiyamah. And that will be global. Nothing like, what happened in the volcanic eruption in Iceland just a few months ago. Europe became very worried, and we saw that the aircrafts were grounded. Even in one of the funerals of the European presidents, Air Force One could not fly. And this was just a appetizer. When it covers the whole world, all your system and technology will become nothing. And so when we talk about this concept of Dukhan, this is something which is going to happen on a global level. Salawat. At that time, according to the ayat of Qur'an, the people, especially those who will be non-believers, they will pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, رَبَّنَا اكْشِفْ عَنَّا الْعَذَابِ إِنَّا مُؤْمِنُونَ. At the last moment they will say that now we believe. And you will see there are stories in the Qur'an where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, once the azab has come on you, then you do tawbah, it's not going to help. The last moment tawbah after seeing the azab doesn't help. Just the example of Fir'aun. Fir'aun, when he saw that, now the water is going to come on him, he says to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that I believe in you, in the Rabb of Musa and Harun. And that is where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses the Arabic phrase there, Al-an. I'm putting the tone there. Means now it's too late. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says to Fir'aun that, it's too late, you should have believed before the azab came. And so the same situation will happen, that when this smoke will engulf the whole world, those who were non-believers will now say, رَبَّنَا اكْشِفْ عَنَّا الْعَذَابِ إِنَّا مُؤْمِنُونَ. And what will be the response of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? The response is very clear. أَنَّ لَهُمُ الذِّكْرَى وَقَدْ جَاءَهُمْ رَسُولٌ مُبِينٌ. How will this reminder of the azab now help them at the last moment? While, a clear Rasulun Mubin had come to them, referring to the Prophet, of course. He is the last Prophet. He had come with very clear message, but you do not accept him, and so there is no chance of them, for the azab to be averted from them. Just one more point before we continue. This is a surah where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala began with the words Hamim wal Kitabil Mubin. He described the Qur'an as Mubin, something which is clear, Bayyin. And we see that if you look at the language and the rhythm in the Arabic language used in the Qur'an, in this surah Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has described Kitab as al-Mubin, Rasul as the Mubin, Dukhan as the Mubin, and there is another ayat which will come later on in the story of Musa tomorrow night inshallah, where the miracles of Musa is being described as Sultanum Mubin. And so this is again just a language, flavor of how Quran in the same surah uses the same words in different contexts. This is for those who might be interested in the language. And so what will happen after the unbelievers will see the smoke, and then they will be praying to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, asking for a version of the adhab. And this is where we will see that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that, these people, what you are doing now is nothing new. There were people even during the days of the Prophet they used to do the same thing. Even after the message comes, they still reject. But they turn away from him. What did they do when the Rasulun Mubin came to them? They turned away from him. وَقَالُوا مُعَلَّمٌ مَجْنُونَ. And they actually ridiculed him by calling him mu'allam. Mu'allam means somebody who had been taught, tutored. And majnoon means somebody who is lunatic. Na'udhu billah, mad. And this is where we see that, the mushrikeen, when they didn't want to accept the message of Rasulullah, they started with the process of ignoring. That was the first strategy. Therefore, maybe this is a fashion, which comes and goes. So maybe, these are some radical people in Mecca, they come up with this idea. It will just die out by itself. When they realize that, no, this is there to stay, that's where they started to see, what do we do? And one of the plans that they had and the tactics that they used was propaganda. And this is relevant to us. We go through the similar situation, and you have to look at the seerah of the Prophet to learn the lessons and get some, encouragement from there and hope in the future. Basically, they call him mu'allam. Mu'allam, the word mu'allim means the teacher. Mu'allim, where lam becomes not fatha but kathra. But if you change it to fatha, mu'allam, this is the student, somebody who has been taught. And so one of the things they said that, he probably, in his journey to Syria for business, maybe he learned things. And later on, they even used to ascribe it to some of the early Muslims who were not even from the Arabic background. And this is actually mentioned in Surah 16, ayat 103, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَلَقَدْ نَعْلَمْ أَنَّهُمْ يَقُولُونَ إِنَّمَا يُعَلِّمُهُ بَشَرٌ. Allah says, we know that they say that a bashar, a human being, is teaching these things to Muhammad. It's not a revelation from God. لِسَانُ الَّذِي يُلْحِدُونَ إِلَيْهِ عَجَمِيٌّ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says the person that they are referring to as the teacher of Muhammad is an ajami, he's a non-Arab. وَهَذَا لِسَانٌ عَرَبِيٌّ مُبِينٌ. Again, the word mubin from another ayat coming here, where Allah says, the teacher that you are saying is the teacher of Muhammad is a non-Arab, whereas this Qur'an is in a very clear Arabic language. And so this was one way of saying that, somebody has taught him. We look at other titles also used here, mu'allamun wa majnoon. Majnoon means somebody who is lunatic. Actually, the word comes from somebody who is possessed by the jinn. And that's why the word majnoon comes from somebody who is not in his own control. There is jinn controlling him. And normally we use in Arabic, Farsi, and Urdu also for anyone who is not in his right senses, we say he's majnoon. But that's where it comes from jinn, overcoming them. Now, when they, first they started this concept of saying that, he's majnoon. But when people looked at Rasulullah, they realized, he's not a, na'udhu billah, lunatic person. He's a very sensible man. Even when he brings this ayat, very eloquent, very clear, and even the message is very powerful. And so when that, level didn't work, they changed to another one. And this is where they started saying, looking at the verses of Qur'an, there is a rhythm, in the ayat. they started saying that, well, he's a sa'ir and sha'ir, different. What happened? Anyway, these are all code words. Don't worry about it. The fonts have changed. There are ayat of Quran where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that, they basically called him they used the term sha'ir first, which means poet. But then the good thing was that the Arabs were expert in poetry at that time. They knew that poetry is one thing, what Muhammad is bringing is not poetry. So that label although didn't work. So Majnoon didn't work, Sha'ir didn't work. So then they said, well, let's change the label. And they started now using the label of Sahir. That he has some magical powers. He's a sorcerer. So don't listen to him. Actually, the elders among them, even when they would pass by the alley where the Prophet used to every day gather with Muslims in the house of Zayd bin Arqam, their attitude was they would pass by and they would close their ears. They were afraid if they hear the words of the Qur'an, they will be bewitched. That was a kind of, mentality and the propaganda done against the Prophet. And eventually we know that these labels didn't work. And that's where the mushrikeen then changed their strategy. So they went from ignoring him to then using propaganda against him. When that failed, they went to the level of violence. They couldn't touch him directly, so they started, behaving violently towards those early Muslims who didn't have tribal protection. People like, parents of Ammar and Bilal and others. And that's where the Prophet basically asked them to do hijrat and go to Abyssinia. It's only after the wafat of Abu Talib alayhi salam that we see that they plan to now attack the Prophet himself physically. And this was where the plan to assassinate the Prophet took place. And that's where the hijrat happened according to the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So basically what we see here is that, this usage of labels against us, Muslims are fanatics, they're extremists, terrorists, all these things that we see now. It's nothing new really. They come up with all new labels, but eventually the truth will prevail. We will be suffering in one way, but you have to keep that era of the Prophet's life in Mecca in mind. That eventually the victory is of the true people, and that will be the continuation of this ayat when we go inshallah tomorrow, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses the example of Prophet Musa alayhi salam and how he delivered Musa and the people of Musa from Fir'aun. Referring to these people who would be asking for this azab of the smoke to be averted, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, by looking at the behavior of the non-believers in the past, especially the days of the Prophet, they are not going to believe, even if the azab is lifted. وَإِنَّ كَاشِفُ الْعَذَابِ قَلِيلًا إِنَّكُمْ أَعِذُونَ. Even if we will remove the punishment a little, behold, you will surely revert to your evil ways. And this is basically the attitude of those who do not really accept from the depth of their heart. يَوْمَ نَبْطَشُ الْبَطْشَةَ الْكُبْرَى إِنَّ مُنْتَقِمُونَ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, referring now to the day of Qiyamah, after that smoke will surround the whole earth. Qiyamah will happen 40 days after that. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, on that day we shall seize them as severe seizing. We shall indeed take revenge against them. Now the term inna muntaqimun, some people would say, well, why are you projecting Allah negatively? Intiqam, to take revenge. Muntaqim, somebody who is going to take revenge. When we use this term for human beings, we have this element of positive and negativity together. Revenge, in a sense, somebody did something wrong to me, and I would like to get an opportunity to do the same. That's what the meaning of revenge is there. But that's also what is justice is there. But then the negative part of intiqam is that, you have this hatred or anger in the heart, and your heart becomes calm, after intiqam has been taken. Now, when we use the term muntaqim for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it only refers to the meaning of justice. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not like human beings. It's not that, he feels good, I did, I punished them. No. The issue is that he's taking intiqam not because of his own personal feelings. We cannot even think of Allah in that sense. It is because they were unjust to the prophets and the believers of their own time. And so keep that concept when we use the word muntaqim for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In one of the discussions, inshallah, we'll continue this, and as I mentioned that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is looking at the time of Makkah, and just to console the people of Makkah, especially the Prophet himself. The following section of the Surah Dukhan deals with the example of Musa alayhi salam and Fir'aun, and you will see how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala repeats many stories, but sometimes he makes it so, the summary itself is very important also. Sometimes you can take a long story and summarize that in few words, and that is one of the miracles of the Qur'an, and that's what we'll see inshallah tomorrow. Before I end, one of the things I had mentioned 2 nights ago when we were talking about what happens in Laylatul Qadr. The attempt was to explain the concept of Qadr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the decrees of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which is finalized every year in Laylatul Qadr. And I gave you the example that in any aspect of our life where the muqaddimat, the preliminaries are from Allah, but the end result is our doing, that's not qaza and qadr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The example was Allah will give you health and wealth and the opportunity. It is for you to do the right thing, whether you use the opportunity for committing sin or you refrain yourself. If you refrain, you will be rewarded for it. And so that's nothing to do with qaza of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But when you reverse the process, where the initial work is done by the human beings, but the end result is not in the hands of the humans. The example was of the farmer, tilling the land, sowing the seeds, watering the farm and everything. At the end, there is no guarantee. Something can happen. Natural disasters can come and destroy everything. And that is where we see the interaction between our hard work and the concept of tawakkul. That is qaza of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This concept that we have in the modern world that believe in yourself, yes, you have to believe in yourself, but not to the extent that you forget that there is somebody up there. You believe in yourself, but always, have this tawakkul on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. One of the examples of that, difference between what is normal thing and what is qaza of Allah is in the medical field. If a person is not feeling well, goes to the doctor, gets the prescription, buys the medicine, and uses it. Getting the cure, the process of medication, that is his part. Is it going to cure the illness or not? That's not in the hands of the doctor or the patient. That's in the hands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that is why, in the Eastern society, the doctors and hakims, whenever they used to write the prescription, at the top they would say, huwa shafi. that, oh patient, I'm giving you this prescription for this medicine, but there's no guarantee that it's going to work. I'll do my part, you have to do your part, but you have to pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that your hard work of buying and taking this medicine is going to be fruitful at the end. And that is known as qaza of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is where we see the difference between the two aspects. If a person who is not feeling well doesn't go to the doctor, doesn't buy the medicine, doesn't use the medicine, can you blame that person for his illness? Yes. But if somebody does everything and still he is not being cured, can you now blame him? No, because the cure doesn't come from him. It comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So those aspects of life where a person cannot be blamed, that is where you have to identify that this is Allah's will, coming into my life. So that's how you differentiate between the qaza of ilahi and what you are responsible for in your life. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept our ibadat, increase our tawfiqat. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين.